It says we are live. So I'm excited to be here today. Today is December 14th, 2025. And got a special Christmas message for you all. Also, we're going to be giving away a free copy of Sandra Tanner's book. Oh, I thought it was behind me. Oh, here it is. It's right here. So we're going to be giving away Lighthouse later today. And so I also wanted to share a special message about that I put together about Christmas. And so, oh, yay, we've got somebody here. Thank you for popping in. We've got Jordan Andrew Jefferson. Welcome. Hi. And he loves my videos. Thank you so much. That makes me very happy to hear. So feel free to comment. Let us know where you're from. It looks like Jordan's on YouTube. Would love to know. I don't think I've ever had anybody live on LinkedIn, but we're on Facebook as well. So tell us what city or country you're from. Jordan loves learning all about the restoration. Me too. So that's very cool. So anyway, that's very exciting. So I think I'll just go ahead and jump in to my little presentation. I was trying to get it ready, but I didn't want to be late, and I was actually on time today, so that was exciting. But go ahead and comment if you have any questions. Let me know. We can see Eric Nordquist is from Baltimore, Maryland. So welcome, Eric. I recognize your name. And so thanks for coming. And let's see, is this going to, it says it's better with a second monitor, but I actually have a second monitor today. And of course, it doesn't seem to be working properly, but we'll see here. Oh, maybe it will. Well, let's see here. So if I try to share my screen here, will it work on the first try? Because it never, oops, I clicked the wrong thing. Never ever works on the first try. What are we doing? Let's see here. I always hate that this is so hard to do. Maybe I should do more live streams. Do you guys like that? Oh, by the way, well, I will make a quick announcement before I share my screen here that I'm going to make a big, so last year on January 1st, we had my awards show, awarded Matt Harris Book of the Year and some other books that I had read this year that I thought were worthy of awards. And so I'm planning on doing that, also planning on a big announcement. So I'll tease you with that. It's not quite ready, so I'm not quite ready to share it yet. But anyway, just be planning on that probably in the afternoon because I want to sleep in. We have a big family party every New Year's Eve, and I'm going to sleep in. So it'll probably be the afternoon or evening of January 1st while you're all watching those bowl games. So anyway, hopefully, oh, it looks like it's working. I'm excited here. So I wanted to share a little PowerPoint I put together. They actually asked me to teach, and so I said I wanted to talk about Christmas. I even started with a rant, and I said, I think sometimes we don't, in the LDS church, we go through, like, I think today or last week, we were trying to talk about official declarations 1 and 2, and I was like, it's Christmas time. We need to talk about Christmas. So we're going to talk about Christmas. So anyway, if I can get my slide to advance here. So some of this information, we're going to first start talking about the Star of Bethlehem. It comes from a 20-year-old video called Mystery of the Three Kings, one of the greatest stories of Christmas. And I thought it was fantastic. I wanted to share some things. And of course, the Star of Bethlehem is mentioned in both Matthew 2 and 3 Nephi 1. and we're going to be talking about both of those today. And so we'll just dive in. So the question is, when was Christ born? The year 0 doesn't exist. It's either 1 AD or 1 BC. There is no year 0. And so the calendar that we have was created by Dionysius Exiguus, which means Dennis the Little. The weird thing is I was looking for some clip art or something for Dennis the Little. He was a 6th century monk, theologian, and canonist, famous for inventing Anno Domini AD dating system, which marks the years from the birth of Jesus, and for calculating Easter dates, though he mistakenly placed Christ's birth several years too late. And so I was looking for Dennis the Little, and I found a video from Dennis Little, which I thought was hilarious. And he's a historian of some sort, I think in California, if I remember right. And I thought, that's too funny not to share. Little probably meant humble, short, or small, reflecting his modest nature, not his stature. But I couldn't resist. I had to share that thing of Dennis Little, or Dennis the Little, who was the person who did the calendar that we currently have. Now, several years ago, I had an interview with Dr. Jeffrey Chadwick, and pretty much all scholars agree that Herod the Great's death was in 4 BC. Dennis's calendar is definitely off. Even at the time, Dennis the Little's calendar was, the people were like, I think you made a mistake. But at any rate, it's pretty well established that Herod the Great's death was in 4 BC. Elder James Talmage said that Jesus was born on April 6th, 1 BC, but Dr. Chadwick says, no, that's not true. He says historical data shows that Jesus can't have been born as late as 1 BC because Herod had been dead for 3 or 4 years by then. And so I did an interview with Dr. Chadwick, and he believes that December of 5 BC is the correct date. I've got the link there. The article is titled Dating the Birth of Christ, and it's at byu.edu there. You can see the link on the screen. I don't want to read it because it's garbage, but for those of you who are listening, I'll try to post it in the show notes. He actually wrote 2 articles. This first article is kind of interesting because he puts the birth of Christ in December. Most people put it in the spring of April, but he has some reasons looking at both the Bible and the Book of Mormon. Of course, Christmas stands for Christ Mass, and so obviously the Catholics had a Mass on Christmas Day. That's where Christ Mass comes from. So I also did an interview a few years ago. In fact, it was funny because I kind of interchanged them at the beginning with Dr. Thomas Wayment from BYU, and he agrees that Herod's death was in 4 BC, but he argues against Dr. Chadwick that we can't know with precision within more than a year or 2, and certainly not a month. So one of the things Dr. Wayment said was Matthew and Luke weren't writing history, but were writing gospels, and so they were unconcerned with certain details. So in Luke 2, unlike Matthew, it talks about the census, where it says Cyrenius in the King James Version, but it's probably Quirinius, which is a better spelling apparently of Cyrenius. The census that's in Luke 2 is historically problematic, as the Bible places the census much later, around 6, I've got CE there, but AD. So it's about 10 years after the death of Herod. So this creates a big timeline contradiction. Scholars suggest that Luke may have been referring to an earlier registration or loyalty oath, but it definitely had historical inaccuracies because there was no single Roman census that covered the whole empire, and there was no census that required travel to distant ancestral homes like Bethlehem. And so he wrote an article, a response to a recent proposal, and that proposal was Dr. Chadwick. But when was Jesus born? And so there's a link there as well. And so that was a super fun interview. One of the interesting things, Dr. Wayman and I got into some of the stories, the stories outside the Bible of Jesus. One of my favorite stories. Well, there's a couple. One of them was when Jesus was a little kid. He was making these little mud birds on the Sabbath, and the leaders got after him saying, "Hey, you're not supposed to be playing with mud on the Sabbath." And Jesus clapped his hands, and the birds just flew away. So it's a great story. There's another story about Joseph and Mary. I wish I should have looked this up. This wasn't part of my presentation, but where Mary was like really young, 14 years old or something, and she needed to get married. And so they were trying to decide who to marry her off to. And so they had a bunch of guys lined up there. I believe the book is called the Evangelion or something like that. I might have that wrong. But anyway, in the story, a bird lands on Joseph's head, and he was an older man, 40, 50, 60 years old, much older than Mary. And so they took the bird landing on Joseph's head as a sign. And so that's how Joseph and Mary became betrothed. So anyway, that was a fun conversation with Dr. Wayment. Trying to remember how long ago that was. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago that we had that conversation. What created the star? Was it a planetary alignment, a solar eclipse, a coronal mass emission or ejection? Did a supernova light up the sky, or a comet? So we're going to talk about all of these possibilities, and different scholars have different beliefs. So this is astronomer Michael Molnar. He wrote an article from the Rutgers University Press called "The Star of Bethlehem: the Legacy of the Magi." And so he proposed, and by the way, this is a picture. This is actually his obituary picture. The film Mystery of the Three Kings was published in 2004, and I don't know exactly when he died. I didn't dive into it that far, but this was his obituary picture, so he's no longer with us, unfortunately. But anyway, he proposed that the Star of Bethlehem was where the moon passed in front of Jupiter, and so the theory is based on Babylon's astrological beliefs concerning the birth dates of divine kings. So this specific event was projected to occur on a date that aligned with the solar eclipse. So this one's kind of a little bit solar eclipse and a little bit Jupiter and the moon. And so he had a lot of interesting things to say in that video. Jerry Grover, he was on my podcast, and he talked about a solar eclipse. He notes that in the historical records, a solar eclipse indicate that one occurred in 6 BC. That's a date near the proposed birth time. Of course, Herod died in 4 BC, so 2 years before 6 BC, that would explain why Herod went after all the children. I'm sure you're all familiar with the story of when the wise men came to Herod, and he's, where is he that is born king of the Jews? And Herod didn't know anything about it. Hey, come back to me and tell me when you find him. And of course, the wise men left, and then Jesus and Joseph and Mary left for Egypt. And Herod was so angry that he had all the children, all the boys under the age of 2 killed because he wanted to kill the king. And so 6 BC could be a good time for that. So the solar eclipse was particularly rare because the sun rose in Mesoamerica and set a partial eclipse in Persia, which is where they think the wise men came from. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So in Mesopotamia, eclipses were associated with the rising of a new king or the death of an old king, that old king being Herod, so that's why he was a little bit concerned. And this aligned with the purpose of the sign. So we'll talk a little bit more about the wise men. So this is a possibility of the solar eclipse. Another option, I thought this was very interesting, the coronal mass ejection. And so this was something I wasn't super familiar with. I'm not an astronomer. But the CME, or coronal mass ejection, is a massive ejection of plasma that hits the Earth's magnetosphere. I don't even know what a magnetosphere is, but anyway, It causes northern lights to become supercharged and move south. He says as even far south as Mesoamerica. A historic event like the Carrington event, which happened in the mid 1800s, demonstrated that this phenomenon could create such intense brightness that people thought it was daytime. Now, one of the interesting things about this is, in the Book of Mormon, it says that not only did the star appear, but it was night. It was as light as day all night long. And so Jerry says, well, what could have caused something to be light all night in the American hemisphere, but that wasn't noticed in the Middle East? And so he says a coronal mass ejection. So that kind of scientifically fits with that. That's kind of interesting. The resultant auroras would have appeared as supercharged northern lights, weird domes, and other shapes in Mesoamerica, potentially terrifying the local populace due to their religious connotation, like snakes in the sky. So in church today, one of the speakers had mentioned that there was a sign given in the Book of Mormon where all the people would die if or would be put to death if no sign appeared, because Samuel the Lamanite had mentioned that. And so, this sounds pretty interesting. This event also explains the report that people heard the signs and wonders, as the northern lights can create a crackling, hissing sound when ions drop and release their charge in the atmosphere. So I think this is a really interesting idea. Obviously, that's not something you can predict when the sun's going to do that. So that's not something you can look on astronomical tables, but a very interesting idea. Two other things that were mentioned earlier were the supernova and the comet. So generally, supernovas are too short in duration. They wouldn't light up the sky for the whole night. And so that wouldn't really be a good option for the Book of Mormon signs. And a comet, that's a possibility, as we tell the story with in the old world, the wise men followed the star, and so if they're following a comet over the house of Jesus or whatever, that could be something. But generally, comets were seen as a sign of impending doom, so that doesn't. And plus, and in the Western Hemisphere, the American Hemisphere, that wouldn't have lit up the sky all night. So I think we have a couple of comments here. This is kind of nice with two monitors. Maybe I should do this more often. If I can get my mouse to move the way I want it to. Here we go. So Eric Nordquist says, a compass needle aligns along the magnetosphere lines. Oh, thank you. Earth's molten iron core has a magnetic moment associated with it. Very good. Thank you. And then Douglas Evans, Rick B is the OG of LDS YouTubers. Thank you, Douglas. I appreciate that. That's fantastic. Now I got to figure out how to move my slides again. There we go. Okay. So where did the wise men come, or the three kings come from? Or another term is the Magi. So we have a couple of different ideas in fact, both of these ideas are mentioned in the Three Kings video. So the top left map there is it does work here. So the interesting thing here, you've got the Sinai Peninsula here up on the top. And then I know along, like Daniel Peterson and some of the Mesoamerican proponents have said, I lost my mouse again. Where did it go? Oops, I went too far. There's this. Okay, so along this line here where it says Dedan and Ophir and Sabta and Sheba, Queen of Sheba, you remember that. This along the Red Sea on the east coast of the Red Sea is the frankincense trail. As we know, the wise men brought frankincense. And so those are found down here in Sabta and Sheba, I believe, which would be modern day Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula. And so some wonder if the wise men, if the wise men came, we'll talk about the wise men in a second, from one of these. But the problem with Sabta and Sheba, There are some legends about those that we'll talk about in just a moment. But the problem with those are they are south of Israel, not east. And it says in Matthew that the wise men came from the east. Over here in the bottom right map, you can see the Roman Empire and Jerusalem, and the Parthian Empire, or the Persian Empire was another word for that. So that would be Iran, Iraq area. And so that's directly east. Just like today, the Iranians and the Israelites don't really like each other. The Romans didn't like the Persians either. The two empires were constantly battling on the borders of the empire. And so where it says that when wise men from the east came, I mean, it doesn't say Parthian Empire, but that's a good possibility. And we'll talk more about Iran and how they relate to this story here shortly. But that Herod was greatly troubled. You got a bunch of Persians coming in here. Yeah, he would be very troubled. A bunch of Persians or Iranians or Iraqis maybe coming into Jerusalem, and so that would have been very, very concerning to Herod as well as the Roman Empire. So what are the names of the three wise men? We've got some historical names here: Balthazar, Melchior, and Gaspar. This is an old fresco that illustrates the three wise men, or were they three kings? The Bible doesn't say that they were kings, but some people think that they might have been. Another three possible names are Hormuzan, the king of Persia. I might be saying these horribly wrong, but Yezagad, the king of Sabta, and Parazad, king of Sheba. The queen of Sheba was supposedly came and visited the ark. Was it under Solomon, or I believe so. So anyway, those are a couple different names. Were they kings? We'll talk about that in just a minute. But those are possible names for the three wise men or the three kings. Now, of course, they brought gifts, and the gifts would have helped Jesus, as they're trying to get away from Herod. Gold's obviously going to be very valuable, very helpful for them. Frankincense and myrrh, we're going to talk a little bit about that. But gold represents kingship, frankincense represents divinity or God, and myrrh represents healing. Jesus did heal a lot of people, and so that was that would have been very helpful gifts. Frankincense is a sort of a sweet incense. It's a ritual in many religions, and it's from a resin of a rare tree on the Arabian Peninsula. That's why some want to advocate for that along that frankincense trail on the the east coast of the Red Sea. That would have been how they would have gone up to Jerusalem and Israel and that sort of a thing. It was literally worth its weight in gold at the time, and so it was extremely valuable. Myrrh was even more valuable. It was 7 times the weight of gold. So it was used in embalming for the dead. It has healing properties. It's the sign of a physician. Apparently, it has antifungal properties, and it has been used in cancer research. So one of the interesting things about myrrh, since it is used in embalming for the dead, even in Jesus's birth, that's kind of a foreshadowing of his eventual death as well. So there's an interesting, I thought I'd put that on the next slide, but I didn't. There's an interesting story where the wise men place the 3 gifts before Jesus and ask which one he wants, and he wants all 3 because he was a king, he was godly, and he was a healer, and so they gave him all 3. So that's kind of a fun little story there. Were they wise men or kings? So the word magoi is the same word that we use for magician or sorcerer. So the men from the east, presumably Parthians, were healers. They were dream readers. astrologers. That's why they were looking in the sky, and perhaps were mistaken for kings. So the Zoroastrian religion in Iran is a religion as old as Judaism, and there was definitely a lot of um, interrelationship and sharing between the Zoroastrians and the ancient Jews. And some of the interesting things about Zoroastrian beliefs, they are also monotheistic, which was very different than the ancient Roman world, which was polytheistic. Their God is light and evil is darkness. In fact, they have a fire that that they have been running for millennia. Like they will not let this fire go out because it represents God, and so that's kind of interesting. They also believe in a resurrection. They believe in a savior coming to overcome evil. So there seems to be some overlap with Jewish beliefs there. And in the Arabic Gospel of the Infancy, which the oldest copy we have is from 1299 AD, but they think that it probably is earlier than that, probably the 6th century AD. But in this Arabic Gospel of the Infancy, Zoroaster predicted the birth of Jesus. So, the question is, I mean, obviously the text we have, they think it dates from the 6th century, so that would have been, 500 years too late. But, interesting things. So these Zoroastrian astronomers would have recognized that in 7 BC, there was a confluence of Jupiter and Saturn, and they would have recognized that as a new king in Israel. And so that's why when they came to Herod, where is he, the new king that is born? And Herod's like, I don't know. Why don't you tell me? Herod was such a bad guy. He killed 3 of his brothers. Of course, there's the massacre of the innocents, the young children under the age of 2, although historians do question whether that really happened, but it definitely is a legend. And if anybody would have done it, it would have been Herod. He was such a bad guy. So some other options for dates are April 17th, 6 BC. Jupiter was eclipsed by the moon in the constellation of Aries, if I have that right. I think that's right. And so, according to ancient interpretation, that would be the coming of a new king of the Jews. I like April 17th because it happens to be my sister's birthday. I need to tell her that, hey, Jesus might have been born on your birthday, or vice versa. Another option is Jupiter apparently represents the royal Christ, and Saturn represents the old ruler. Those merged in 7 BC. And if they meet in Pisces, that is also a sign of Israel. So I don't really understand that too well, but they mentioned that in the video. I thought that was interesting. Also in 7 BC, there was this happened in May, September, and October. So those are 3 different months where Jupiter and Saturn merged in 7 BC. So, what do you guys think? I don't know. Don't know when Jesus was born, but there's a lot of possibilities there. So let's talk a little bit about the 12 days of Christmas. I had this slide and I had 8 slides on it, so I only did 8 things. But I don't know why there are so many frickin' birds in the song about the 12 days of Christmas. I got a partridge in a pear tree there, 2 turtle doves, 3 French hens, 4 calling birds. I didn't know what that was, so I just got that. 5 golden rings, those are not birds, obviously. 6 geese a laying, 7 swans a swimming, and then the 8 maids a milking. Like, I don't know what this person has to do with birds, but I've got something to talk about with the 12 days of Christmas that I didn't know about. So 3 Kings Day occurs 12 days after Christmas. So the first day of Christmas is actually Christmas Day. And so January 6th is known as 3 Kings Day. It's meant, and so apparently it's celebrated in Spanish-speaking countries. I probably should show you my list. I did a poll, or not a poll, but I asked a question about in the video, it just said Spanish-speaking countries, and I said, "Is that Spain? Is that Mexico?" Like, and so I got lots of answers of all people who either served missions or were from Spanish-speaking countries, Mexico, Guatemala, like everywhere. And so of course the Magi or the Magoi came to visit Jesus's house, and there's a legend that it was 12 days after the birth of Christ. Obviously, that would make Jesus picking the three gifts a little different. So was it 2 years or was it 12 days? But there's a tradition that it was 12 days after Christmas. And so Matthew seems to include the story of the Magi as a symbol where pagans, although I don't think, pagans we usually think of as like ancient Roman religion, polytheists, but the pagans or the Zoroastrians in this case would bow down and recognize Jesus' divinity. Every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is the Christ. And so that would be kind of a fulfillment of that scripture. I think that was in Isaiah. And so in Spanish-speaking countries, Christmas isn't nearly as big of a deal as it is in the United States. Presents are exchanged on January 6th, and it's a lot bigger deal. It's a Three Kings Day, and the presents aren't left by Santa Claus, they're left by the three kings. So I do have one comment here from Nick Berg. In Mexico, they celebrate both Christmas and here's my terrible Spanish, El Día de los Reyes. Christmas Eve or La Noche Buena is a bigger day compared to Christmas Day. So if any of you speak Spanish, I am curious of how badly I butchered that or if that was okay. But at any rate, so I had lots of people. My friend Angela talked about the Canary Islands. She served a mission there. And so apparently that's a big deal. Also in France, there's a special cake prepared, and they will put a little plastic or either a king or a baby. And if you find the plastic baby or plastic king, you get good luck for the next year. Or I think in Mexico, you have to make tamales on February 6th, a year later. I don't know if that's good luck or bad luck. But at any rate, I thought, why haven't Americans latched onto this? Like more holidays? And plus, we should do something better about January 6th. Anyway, I would like to celebrate, why not celebrate Three Kings Day? My nephew married a woman from Mexico, and she had made a Three Kings cake. One of my Facebook commenters had said something about, well, they sell them in New Orleans, but I've never been in New Orleans on January 6th, or Mardi Gras for that matter. I have been for Halloween, and that wasn't a big deal for Halloween. But at any rate, it was interesting to learn more about all of the different opinions here. This is kind of nice having two monitors. I don't have to stop and look. Eric Nordquist, my personal opinion is that the two birth narratives are better understood as having separate non-historical theological narratives. Absolutely, the theological narratives were of prime importance, not the history. So I would totally agree with that. Perhaps naively, I'm curious why one would want to find a natural phenomenon to explain the miraculous light phenomenon described in Nephi. Why not? I can't remember, Eric, if you're LDS or not, but if you're a Book of Mormon believer, why wouldn't you want to find that out? So, and plus, Michael Molnar, he's not LDS either, and he's finding the Star of Bethlehem. So, and a lot of those ideas were his ideas, I believe. So anyway, that's interesting. Let's see, is that going to work? No, of course. Here we go. All right, let's talk a little bit about legends of the wise men. So I thought these were great fun. The city of Sava, which is in Iran. Marco Polo, who lived from 1254 to 1324, so somewhere in between those 2 years, claimed that he was shown the three tombs of the wise men in the city of Sava, or Saba, or I don't know how you spell it, but or even how you say it. It's located in modern-day Iran, southwest of Tehran. So he describes the tombs, finding three very large and beautiful monuments side by side with a square building and a domed roof above each one. Now, I should mention, we really don't know how many wise men there were. The Bible does not say. It just says wise men from the east. So were there 2? Were there 4? Were there 3? We don't know. Somehow we've settled on 3. So Marco Polo said that the local belief was that the bodies inside still were intact with hair and beard remaining. So that's pretty interesting. The names that Marco Polo recorded were the names of Gaspar or Jasper or Casper. I think those are other variations of Gaspar, Melchior, and Balthazar, showing that the Western tradition of their names had reached Persia. Of course, this is 1,000 years after the birth of Christ, 1,200 years after. And so anyway, I thought that was interesting, but that's not all. Ethiopia has a legend of the wise men in Aksum. I think that's how you say that. The Ethiopian Orthodox, oh boy, these are hard words, Tewahedo tradition has a legend that King Bazin or Bazin of Aksum was one of the magi, often associated with Balthazar and Gaspar. A tomb in Aksum is sometimes referred to as the Magi's tomb or the tomb of King Bazin or King Bazin. So I thought, Ethiopia is interesting. I also know that they have a place that they believe holds the Ark of the Covenant, that somehow the Ark of the Covenant was whisked out of Israel and it ended up in Ethiopia. They won't let anybody inside to inspect it. But Ethiopia, I think, has some really interesting traditions, including this one about the wise men. Turkey, historically Constantinople, according to tradition, the relics were originally brought to Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul, by Saint Helena. She was the mother of the Emperor Constantine in the 4th century before they were later transferred to Milan. And so that's interesting. And in fact, I guess it kind of goes to Eric's question. Eric talks about the Book of Mormon, but, people in the Bible are looking for relics and that sort of a thing as well. So this is a common thing. You want proof, even if you can't prove it probably. Milan, Italy, the relics were allegedly housed there in the Basilica of Sant Eustorgio in Milan. I don't speak Italian, so I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. Today, the basilica still contains the empty ancient marble sarcophagus labeled Sepulchrum Trium Magorum. Hopefully I said that right. The tomb of the 3 magi, and some small fragments of the relics that were returned in 1903. So you can go to Milan, Italy. I don't know. I would love to know if anybody has been there to see that. I thought that was interesting tradition. But apparently, after they were in Italy, they went to Germany, specifically Cologne. This is the most famous and widely accepted location in the West for the relics. The magnificent shrine of the 3 kings. I had somebody pronounce this today in church. I don't know how you say that. Draconic shrine. I don't know how you say that. It's traditionally believed to hold the bones of the Magi, and it's located above and behind the high altar of the Cologne Cathedral. The relics were transferred to Cologne from Milan in 1164 by the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. So anyway, I just think these are fun little traditions. I have no idea if any of them are true, but I think they're fun to talk about. So anyway, I wanted to, we're 10 days out, 11 days out from Christmas, and thought it would be fun to share a little bit of a Christmas message with you all. And let's see, so anyway, I thought that was a lot of fun. If you have any comments or questions, hopefully that took it up. All right, so with it being the Christmas season, I thought it would be fun to give away a copy of Lighthouse, Gerald and Sandra Tanner, despised and beloved critics of Mormonism. I meant to do this earlier, but it's been really busy with school and everything. It's by Ronald Huggins. And I believe it is autographed. Yes, it is, by Sandra Tanner. So for those of you who signed up, I'm going to spin this around and see who wins this. Let's see here. All right. Oh, Leon Berg. I know Leon from Kansas City, Missouri. Congratulations, Leon. You are the winner. It's funny when I know people. I don't really know Leon, but we are Facebook friends, and I've seen him comment a lot. So congratulations, Leon. I will try to get this out to you in the mail this week. I feel really bad because I also gave away the Joseph Fielding Smith book, and I haven't mailed it, but I'm going to mail both of these this week. I'm going to really try. So Merry Christmas. Okay, so let's see here. Eric says, nice. That was fun. Jordan Andrew Jefferson, pray for me while dealing with a scary illness. I'm sorry to hear that, Jordan. So hopefully that's not terrible. So I guess if there are no other questions, I am going to try very hard to do more of these live streams, at least once or twice a month, probably on a Sunday evening. Those seem to work pretty well for me. So, and I'm also thinking about, I know somebody who has a phone number that you can call and ask questions, and he plays them on his podcast. And I thought, oh, I wonder if I can do that. So I'm kind of looking into that. And anyway, so that's not my big announcement, but that's something that I'm considering doing. We'll see. Hopefully, the intentions work. The execution works as good as the intentions there. So at any rate, if there's nothing else, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and hopefully I will see you on New Year's Day. Plan on it in the afternoon or evening of New Year's Day. And so Merry Christmas to you all, and to all a good night.